100 years ago today, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, starting World War I. The war lasted over four years with almost 40 million casualties. Our Scott Sheehan looks back at Minnesota's involvement in the Great War.
July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, starting World War I. Over 15 major countries and empires engaged in a nearly 4.5-year war, which killed almost 40 million people.
World War I was a very formative period. It set the groundwork for the 20th century. It was really the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century.
Becky says most countries didn't think the war would last until the end of the year. However, a system of alliances throughout Europe created a larger war than most had intended. Americans at the start of World War I were disinterested in the war. One popular anti-war song, "I Didn't Raise My Boy to Be a Soldier," showed America's thoughts in December of 1914.
10 million soldiers to the war have gone, who may never return again. 10 million mothers' hearts must break for the one who died in vain.
We didn't see it as being in our interest. We had our sphere of influence in the Pacific and in the Western Hemisphere. We didn't want to be involved in Europe's troubles. If they wanted to send their young men to die, then that was their business.
Before America joined the war in 1917, we were sending supplies like flour and grain from Minnesota.
This was one of the centers of grain production in the world. Minneapolis was, and with the mills along the Mississippi River. And so I imagine a lot of that grain made its way with a lot of other food produce to Europe too, but only to the British and the French and some to the Russians. But the Germans were completely blockaded by the British.
Over 118,000 Minnesotans served during the war. Most Minnesotan casualties were from diseases because few saw regular action on the front line.
When they got there, they found out that they were going to be a replacement unit again. And so while some elements of the unit, of the division, especially artillery units, saw combat as core support elements, most of the division didn't see combat.
100 years later, we still feel the effects of the war that was supposed to end all wars, most notably in the Middle East, where countries formed from the collapsed Ottoman Empire still clash over disputed borders. Scott Sheehan, Lakeland News.
The United States joined the war almost 3 years later on April 6, 1917.
If you've enjoyed this segment of Lakeland News, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution to Lakeland Public Television.